Why was everyone laughing at her hands? The question drifted across the rifle range like a whisper carried by the wind. The morning sun spilled over Fort Hood, washing the bleachers in gold, gleaming off rifle barrels lined in neat symmetry. Dozens of soldiers, recruits, NCOs, officers filled the stands with chatter and the restless hum of competition. The annual marksmanship trials had always been part sport, part spectacle. But this year, it had something new, a janitor on the firing line. Naomi Brooks. Mid-40s, coveralls smudged from the motor pool, boots worn down to the stitching. Her hair, streaked with copper and gray, was tied back loosely. In her hands, trembling hands, she carried a rifle that looked like it had survived a war of its own. Duct tape patched the stock. A hairline crack ran along the barrel like an old scar. Every step she took made the laughter grow louder. Somewhere up in the bleachers, a private muttered, "You've got to be kidding. Maintenance staff. Really?" Phones came up instantly, screens glowing, ready to capture what everyone assumed would be a viral moment of humiliation. Naomi didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed on the ground, on the rifle, on the rhythm she'd learned long ago, 4 counts in, 4 hold, 4 out. The rhythm that had kept her alive once upon a time. From a distance she looked fragile. From close up she looked still, too still. "Look at that shake," someone jeered. "She's gonna drop the mag before she even loads it." More laughter rippled through the ranks, harmless to those who'd never known fear, but cutting to anyone who remembered what shaking hands could mean. An older officer, Major Donovan, leaned forward from the back of the bleachers. He didn't join the laughter. His eyes, lined from years of sand and sun, narrowed slightly as he studied her stance. The tremor wasn't random. It had rhythm, control, almost like a habit. Naomi set the rifle down gently. The buttstock clicked against the bench with a sound too deliberate to be clumsy. Her sleeve slipped back as she adjusted the weapon, revealing the faded curve of a tattoo, a serpent, coiled 7 times. The crowd saw it and erupted again. "Fake ink. Guess she wanted to look tough. Probably got it at a truck stop." Their voices bounced off the steel baffles. She didn't answer. The sound didn't reach her anymore. The range, the noise, the smell of oil and brass, it all folded into something smaller, quieter. A place she'd been before, where silence was survival and breathing was everything. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. A shadow crossed her face, the kind that comes not from clouds but from memory. Major Donovan felt a chill crawl up his spine. He knew that look. He'd seen it once in Afghanistan, a medic treating a casualty under mortar fire, hands trembling just like that but never breaking rhythm. Down at the firing line, a broad-shouldered man stepped forward through the crowd. Sergeant Travis Cole, the kind of soldier who loved an audience almost as much as he loved being feared. His grin carried the confidence of someone who'd never been humbled in front of his own men. "Well, well," he said, voice booming. "Did we start letting janitors in now?" The laughter roared again. His squad followed, 6 deep, their phones already streaming. Naomi kept her eyes on the weapon. "Just 1 shot," she murmured. Her voice was quiet, soft enough to be swallowed by the wind. Cole smirked. "1 shot? Lady, I'll put 50 on it. You can't even load that thing without dropping it." More howls of laughter. One of his men chimed in. "Make it 100, she shoots her own foot." Naomi said nothing. She adjusted her grip, checked the magazine, eyes tracing the imperfections along the barrel. Duct tape, old scratches, dust in the seams, but still functional. She'd seen worse. She'd used worse. Donovan's fingers tightened on his coffee cup. He recognized the deliberate slowness. Not hesitation, assessment. Naomi's sleeve slipped again, revealing the full tattoo this time, the serpent coiling in 7 distinct loops. It caught the light for only a second, but that was enough. Cole leaned in, laughing. "What's that supposed to be? Some biker gang? Or you think you're one of those shadow units we hear about?" The squad laughed louder, jeering, circling closer like hyenas scenting blood. Naomi let them. Let it all happen. Her hand trembled, but her breathing stayed steady. That's what they didn't understand. The tremor wasn't weakness. It was memory, old nerve damage dancing with muscle control. She had spent years mastering it, making it part of her aim instead of fighting against it. When she finally looked up, her eyes were calm, too calm. Cole blinked, thrown off by the stillness. "Go ahead," he said mockingly. "Show us what you've got, Grandma." The crowd laughed again, but thinner now, uneasy at the edges. She raised the rifle, slowly. The duct tape rustled beneath her fingers. Her stance looked wrong, feet too close, shoulders hunched, muzzle wobbling. To anyone watching, she was a picture of incompetence, a trembling woman with a broken weapon. "Look at her," one of Cole's men shouted, camera zooming in. "She's shaking like a leaf." She was. And yet, when the stock touched her cheek, the tremor evened out, as if it had been waiting for that moment to find purpose. In the back row, Donovan felt the air change. He'd been around gunfire long enough to sense when something real was about to happen. The laughter dulled in his ears, replaced by the faint hum of anticipation. Naomi exhaled, then squeezed the trigger. The crack split the morning. Every head jerked toward the target screen. Bullseye, dead center. For one long heartbeat, no one moved. "Lucky shot," Cole muttered, too fast, voice thin. "Anybody can get one in the black." Naomi lowered the rifle. Her hand still trembled. Her voice did not. "The firing pins misaligned," she said softly. .3 millimeters. Causes a right drift past 70 meters. "What?" Cole frowned. She repeated it calmly. .3 millimeters. Reeves, one of his men, the self-proclaimed weapons expert, snatched the rifle, inspected it, and froze. His face drained of color. "Holy, she's right." A ripple of confusion ran through the crowd. Phones lowered. Laughter faltered. Cole tried to laugh it off. "So what?" She read a manual. But there was a crack in his voice now, just enough for his men to notice. Naomi said nothing. She only adjusted the strap of her brace, the black metallic band hugging her wrist. Most thought it was a medical support. Only a few old soldiers recognized what it really was: neurostabilization tech, issued years ago to veterans with combat nerve trauma. Major Donovan's breath caught. He knew that model. He'd only seen it once, on a surgeon during a forward operation, and on one sniper who'd saved his convoy years ago. Cole puffed his chest, desperate to reclaim the moment. "Let's see her do it again. 300 meters, 5 shots." The crowd roared back to life, sensing blood again. Naomi didn't move, didn't blink. Her eyes found the far target, a thin silhouette downrange. "5 shots," she repeated quietly. Cole grinned. "If you miss, you admit that tattoo's fake. If you hit hell, I'll clean every toilet on base for a month." Laughter, phones raised again. "Grandma's last stand," someone shouted. Donovan leaned forward, his heartbeat thudding. He'd seen this before, a silence before the storm. The way certain people centered themselves, even when chaos waited to erupt. Naomi breathed, 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. Her tremor seemed to flow with the breath now, not against it. "Anytime you're ready," Cole said mockingly. She raised the rifle again, wobbling, shaking. The crowd chuckled. Then crack. First shot. Gasps, near center hit. Crack. Second shot. Closer still. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "That's not luck." Crack. Third shot. 3 holes so close they almost touched. No one laughed anymore. Even the phones had stopped moving. Naomi exhaled, eyes unwavering. Crack. Fourth shot. The target screen flickered, showing 4 perfect hits forming a slanted pattern. Someone squinted. "Wait, is that a letter?" She adjusted her stance for the last round, calm as still water. Whispered something no one could catch. Crack. Fifth shot. The range fell silent. The letter on the screen was clear now: V. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint click of cooling metal. Donovan's eyes widened. He'd heard that mark before, whispered in classified briefings, burned into the memory of those who'd survived missions that never officially happened. V Viper. He stared at Naomi Brooks, the trembling janitor who had just carved that letter into a target 300 meters away with a cracked rifle. His pulse thudded. His mouth went dry. Cole tried to laugh again, but no sound came. His squad looked pale. And for the first time all morning, Naomi looked right at them, not with anger, not with pride, just stillness. A stillness that didn't need words. The range had gone quiet. The laughter was gone. And somewhere in that silence, every soldier present began to feel the first weight of realization that the woman they mocked wasn't trembling from fear. She was trembling from restraint. The range was silent, too silent. The air felt heavier than before, thick with disbelief. Smoke still curled faintly from the muzzle of Naomi's battered rifle, rising in fragile threads against the sunlight. Every soldier stood frozen, eyes fixed on the glowing target screen. 5 perfect rounds, one single letter. V. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if it too was waiting for something. Then someone whispered, "Viper." The word rippled through the bleachers, carried by voices that trembled between awe and fear. Viper, a name whispered years ago in places where soldiers prayed for ghosts to intervene. A name that belonged to stories no one believed anymore. Sergeant Cole took a step back, his smirk gone. That doesn't mean anything, he stammered. Just a pattern, a coincidence. But no one answered him. The crowd had shifted, their faces no longer mocking but uncertain, haunted, because deep down some of them had heard the same rumors. A unit that didn't exist on paper. Soldiers erased from rosters but burned into legend. 7 of them, marked by a serpent tattoo. 7 who'd vanished after missions no one could explain. Naomi Brooks set the rifle down gently. Her hands trembled again, back to the constant rhythm everyone had laughed at minutes earlier. She adjusted her sleeve, hiding the coiled serpent beneath the fabric, as if tucking a memory away. She didn't need to speak. The letter on the screen had already said everything. Major Donovan's pulse thudded in his ears. He couldn't look away from her. The precision, the breathing, the silence after each shot. It was all too familiar. He'd seen it once, years ago, during a night in Helmand when a sniper's single bullet had saved an entire convoy. The report that followed called it impossible. He remembered the code name written in the margins, Viper 3. Donovan opened his mouth to speak, but before the words could form, the siren wailed. The sound sliced through the air like a blade. "Attention, attention, active shooter outside the perimeter. This is not a drill." The voice from command blared through every loudspeaker across Fort Hood, flat and metallic, but packed with urgency that froze every heart. For a moment, no one moved. The bleachers were a tableau of confusion, faces turning toward one another, unsure whether it was part of an exercise or a nightmare come alive. Then the first shot cracked. It slammed into the concrete barrier near the bleachers, spraying shards of stone. A scream broke the stillness. Phones dropped. Soldiers dove for cover as the echo rolled across the range. Another shot followed, closer this time, sparking off a metal rail. Get down," someone shouted. Panic spread like fire. Boots scrambled against asphalt. Weapons clattered. The sharp smell of cordite mixed with dust as soldiers threw themselves behind benches and barriers. The laughter that had filled the air minutes earlier was replaced by raw, animal fear. Cole's men flattened themselves behind the ammo crates, shouting over one another. "Where it coming from?" "North Ridge." "No, West Tower, I saw flash." The confusion was total. The range, once a place of control and discipline, was now chaos. And in the middle of it all, Naomi didn't move. She stood alone on the firing line, her eyes scanning the horizon with an eerie calm. Her hands still trembled, but her breathing stayed steady, that same rhythm she'd carried her entire life. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. Another round slammed into the dirt at her feet, kicking up dust. The crowd screamed again, but Naomi barely blinked. Her gaze tracked upward past the rooftops, across the glinting metal of the distant scaffolding. When she finally spoke, her voice cut through the chaos like a scalpel. Northwest sector, 1,000, maybe 1,200 meters, elevated position, either the water tower or the scaffolding near Building 7. The entire range froze. Her tone wasn't a guess, it was exact. Cole gawked from behind a concrete barrier. How the hell could you possibly? Another shot cracked, shattering the barricade inches from his head. His words died in his throat. Major Donovan's radio buzzed with overlapping reports, voices yelling over one another. But even as trained spotters called in coordinates, he realized she'd already beaten them to it. She hadn't looked through a scope. She hadn't measured wind or range. She just knew. Soldiers echoed her words into their radios. Confirm northwest, confirm scaffolding. Command came back seconds later, strained, breathless. Confirmed, we have muzzle flash on Building 7. Donovan's throat went dry, she called it perfectly. Blind, unassisted. Naomi's lips moved faintly, counting under her breath. 2 seconds between shots, then 3, then pause. She was listening to the enemy's breathing, hearing rhythm through chaos the way only a sniper could. When the next round cracked across the field, she was already moving. Donovan saw it before anyone else understood what was happening. She wasn't running in panic. She was advancing in sync with the sniper's rhythm. When he fired, she shifted. When silence came, she stepped forward. It looked like madness. It was choreography. Cole shouted after her, "Brooks, get down, that's an order." But she didn't stop. She reached the weapons rack, calm as if walking to mop a spill, and picked up a Barrett M82A1, 50 caliber anti-materiel rifle, nearly 30 pounds of recoil and precision, built for one purpose, to end distant threats. She knelt behind a concrete barrier, sliding the weapon into position with a care that was almost reverent. The massive rifle gleamed in the sunlight, the same light that caught the serpent tattoo curling along her forearm as her sleeve rode up. Her voice was low, steady. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. The tremor in her hands didn't vanish, it synchronized. The subtle shake became part of the rifle's heartbeat. Her sight picture rose and fell in a rhythm so precise it felt unnatural. Through the scope she saw him, a dark figure on the scaffolding, rifle braced on the rail. He was good. His spacing, his angles professional, but he'd made one fatal mistake. He'd assumed no one could see him. Naomi watched the shimmer of heat rising from his barrel, waited, measured the wind in the flutter of a flag near the tower. She didn't just aim, she remembered. When the next muzzle flash blinked in the distance, she was already inside the motion. Exhale, tremor aligned, silence. Crack! The Barrett roared like thunder. The shockwave rippled across the range, slamming through the dust and echoing for miles. For 2 seconds, nothing. Then silence. No return fire. Radios crackled. Command to all units, sniper neutralized. Repeat, threat neutralized. The words washed over the range like a wave. Soldiers who had been pinned down slowly lifted their heads. One by one, helmets peaked above barriers, eyes wide, stunned. The air trembled with disbelief. Naomi remained prone behind the rifle, her cheek pressed to the stock, her finger resting against the trigger guard. She exhaled one last time, sliding the safety on with a soft click. Only then did she lift her gaze. Cole stared from behind cover, his mouth open. How? He couldn't finish the sentence. None of them could. Major Donovan rose slowly, the realization settling heavy in his chest. That shot 1,200 meters first round hit under stress. Not luck, not instinct. History. She'd done it before. The crowd, what remained of it, gathered slowly, hesitant, reverent. No one spoke. Phones hung limply in shaking hands. The same soldiers who'd mocked her an hour ago now couldn't meet her eyes. Naomi pushed herself to her knees. Her hands trembled again, the calm replaced by exhaustion. The tremor was back, not from fear this time, but from release. She touched the edge of the rifle like someone closing an old wound. Donovan approached first. Dust clung to his uniform. His voice came out quieter than he intended. That was 1,200. Naomi's answer was barely audible. 1178. The precision chilled him. Behind them, the siren wound down. The sky felt painfully bright again, as if the world had already forgotten how close it had come to breaking. Cole emerged from behind the barrier, his face pale. The swagger was gone. He stared at the woman he'd ridiculed, the one he'd called Grandma, the one who'd just saved his entire unit. He started, but the words caught. Apology wouldn't fit in his throat. Naomi didn't look at him. She simply stood, slung the Barrett over her shoulder, and walked back toward the line she'd started from. Dust clung to her boots. Her silhouette, small against the vast range, carried a weight that made everyone step aside as she passed. Donovan watched her go, his heartbeat still uneven. Something about the way she carried that weapon, the way she'd spoken coordinates like memories, it wasn't just training. It was instinct built in blood and years. She reached the bench where her old, cracked rifle still waited, the duct tape shining dull silver in the sunlight. She rested a hand on it, just for a second, as if greeting an old friend, and whispered, "Still works." Cole's men stood off to the side, silent, heads down. Their phones were off now. None of them would ever mention those recordings again. The sound of approaching footsteps broke the quiet. A new voice carried over the range, commanding, crisp, impossible to ignore. "Cease movement." Colonel James Whitaker strode toward them, hat tucked under his arm, face drawn tight. The base commander. He moved like a man who already knew what had happened and still couldn't quite believe it. Every soldier straightened instinctively. Dust swirled around his boots as he stopped a few feet from Naomi Brooks. For a long moment he said nothing. His eyes locked on her sleeve, on the faint curve of a serpent's tail peeking from beneath the fabric. His jaw tightened. "Identify yourself," he said finally, voice cutting through the still air. Naomi met his gaze. Her hands trembled, her eyes didn't. "Maintenance staff, sir," she said softly. A ripple of disbelief passed through the ranks. The colonel stared at her, then slowly removed his cover. And before anyone could speak, before anyone could breathe, he raised his hand in salute. The entire range froze again. A colonel saluting a woman in grease-stained coveralls, trembling hands, and no rank on her chest. The silence was absolute. Major Donovan felt something inside his chest tighten. He stood to attention almost without realizing it. Around him, soldiers followed, uncertain at first, then one by one, until the ripple of salutes spread across the range like a tide. Naomi didn't move for a long moment. Then quietly, almost reluctantly, she lifted her shaking hand and returned the salute. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. And in that silence, every soldier on that field understood what their laughter had cost. No one moved. The colonel's salute hung in the air like a held breath. A single, impossible gesture that rewrote everything the soldiers thought they knew about the trembling woman in front of them. Naomi Brooks, the maintenance worker they had mocked, stood rigid, one trembling hand raised to return the salute. Her sleeve slipped again, revealing the serpent's coils, faded ink, 7 loops glinting in the sunlight. Every gaze on the range locked onto it. Some whispered, afraid even to breathe the words out loud. Others simply stared, the realization crawling across their faces like slow dawn. Sergeant Cole's throat worked as he tried to speak, but no sound came out. His squad, the same men who had jeered and filmed her, stood pale, eyes lowered. The laughter that had filled the air only an hour earlier now felt like a sin echoing back at them. Colonel Whitaker held the salute for several seconds longer, then lowered his hand slowly, eyes never leaving hers. His face was pale, his voice low and measured when he finally spoke. "Ma'am," he said quietly, the word falling heavy with meaning, "on behalf of this installation and every soldier standing on this soil, I extend the respect owed to you." A murmur broke through the silence, disbelief and awe tangled together. The colonel wasn't joking. His tone wasn't symbolic. He meant every word. Major Donovan's jaw clenched. He had suspected the truth the moment he saw the letter V on that target. But hearing the colonel say, "Ma'am," confirmed what he'd feared and hoped at once. Naomi didn't answer. She stood with her eyes lowered, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she almost looked embarrassed, not proud, not relieved, but weary, like a woman caught in a light she'd tried for years to avoid. Whitaker turned to the crowd, his tone rising enough for everyone to hear. "You all saw it, the tattoo, the mark." He paused. Let them sit with it. Let the younger recruits look around in confusion while the older veterans stared like they'd seen a ghost. "That," he continued, voice firm now, "is not some cheap ink from a strip mall. That symbol doesn't belong to hobbyists or pretenders. It belongs to warriors who were erased." The younger soldiers frowned, whispering among themselves. "Erased? What does he mean?" Whitaker took a breath, his gaze distant, like he was remembering a briefing from a lifetime ago. They were called the Vipers, an experimental Black Ops unit, trained beyond special forces, beyond anything most of you can imagine. Officially, they don't exist. Their records were destroyed, their names scrubbed from every roster. Even I was told they were gone. The words sank in like lead. The older men in the crowd, the ones with scars, the ones who'd seen things that never made it to reports, looked at one another, eyes wide. One of them, a sergeant major with a silver beard, whispered to the man beside him, "Kandahar, 6, I was there. A sniper pulled us out when comms were dead. Left a mark on the wall, that same damn serpent." The other man swallowed hard. "You're sure?" "They called her Viper," the sergeant major said. "Never saw her face, just her work." Whitaker nodded slightly, as if he'd heard the exchange. "The Vipers carried that serpent coil 7 loops for 7 original members," he continued. "Each one specialized, each one capable of changing the outcome of a battlefield single-handedly. But they didn't fight for medals. They fought for the ones who never made it home." The silence deepened. Naomi stood motionless, eyes downcast, her sleeve halfway down her arm again. She made no effort to hide the tattoo anymore. Cole looked at her, really looked this time. The grease stains on her coveralls, the brace on her wrist, the calm behind the tremor. He felt sick. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. You were one of them." Naomi didn't look up. "I was a mechanic," she said softly. "Now I fix lights and sweep hangars, that's all." But Whitaker's tone left no room for denial. "You're more than that," he said. "I know that look. I've seen it before on men and women who carried their ghosts longer than anyone should have to." Naomi's lips pressed into a thin line. The wind caught her hair, lifting a few strands from her face. When she spoke, her voice carried a quiet ache. "Sir, with respect, ghosts don't salute the living." The colonel blinked, taken aback. For a heartbeat, no one said anything. Then Donovan stepped forward, his tone gentler than before. "You saved every person on this range today," he said. "That's not just maintenance work. You read that shooter's position before anyone could even process what was happening." Naomi's reply came slow, almost reluctant. "You learn to listen to sound when you've lived too long around it. Wind, echo, timing, it never leaves you." Her eyes drifted toward the distant scaffolding, where the sniper's body still lay silhouetted against the sky. For a second, her face flickered not pride, not satisfaction, just sorrow. The kind of sorrow only someone who understood both sides of a rifle's scope could feel. The colonel followed her gaze, then spoke again, quieter now. "How long have you been here?" "3 years," she answered. "And all that time," he said slowly, "you never said a word." She shrugged faintly. Would anyone have listened? The question landed harder than a gunshot. The recruits in the crowd shifted, uncomfortable. Cole looked down at his boots. His squad stood motionless behind him, shame written across every face. Whitaker turned to them. "You mocked her," he said, his voice low but sharp. "You laughed because you saw tremors, age, dirt on her coveralls. You saw weakness where there was more discipline than half this base combined. You thought you were testing her." He paused, the weight of his words hanging heavy. "But she tested you, and most of you failed." A flush crept up Cole's neck. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "Sir, I—" "Don't," Whitaker said simply. His tone wasn't cruel, just final. "You'll spend the rest of your career remembering this moment. That's punishment enough." The colonel turned back to Naomi. "I owe you an apology," he said, "for every soldier here who forgot what quiet strength looks like." Naomi shook her head faintly. "You don't owe me anything, sir. I'm not a soldier anymore." Donovan's voice softened. "You may have left the service, but it never left you." For a long moment, no one spoke. The flags above the range flapped in the Texas wind. The smell of dust and gunpowder lingered. Then, in a voice almost too low to hear, Naomi said, "I didn't come here to be remembered. I came here because silence feels safer than noise." Whitaker studied her, seeing something in her expression, exhaustion, yes, but also peace. The kind that comes only when someone has already lived through everything that can break them. "You don't want recognition," he said quietly. Naomi met his gaze at last. "Recognition gets people killed." The truth of it silenced even the wind. A few of the older veterans nodded faintly. They knew. The young recruits didn't understand yet, but one day they would. Finally, Whitaker straightened, his tone returning to command. "Let this stand as your lesson," he said to the formation. "Strength isn't loud, it isn't obvious. It doesn't swagger or shout. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, trembling hands, dusty boots, quiet corners. And when it's tested, it doesn't speak. It acts." The soldiers stood motionless, absorbing every word. The laughter that had filled the range earlier now felt like a distant echo of something shameful. Naomi's eyes softened briefly as she looked across the rows of faces, some humbled, some still confused, some on the verge of tears. She didn't look angry, just tired. She reached for her sleeve again, tugging it down gently over the tattoo. The serpent vanished beneath the fabric once more. "I have work to finish," she said simply. Whitaker opened his mouth to respond, but she was already turning away, walking toward the maintenance truck parked at the edge of the field. The sun caught her silhouette again, glinting off the metal brace on her wrist. No one stopped her. No one dared. Donovan stood still, watching her go. Behind him, Cole finally whispered, "She's just going back to work." Donovan nodded slowly. "That's what they do." The colonel's gaze followed her until she disappeared past the hangars. Then he exhaled, shoulders heavy. "Record nothing of this," he said quietly. "No footage, no posts. If you filmed, delete it. You will not turn her into a headline. You will not turn her silence into spectacle." The soldiers nodded quickly. No one argued. And as the formation began to disperse, subdued, shaken, the moral of the day clung to the air like smoke after gunfire. True strength had no audience. It didn't demand to be seen. It just waited. Until it was needed most. The colonel turned toward Donovan one last time. "You think she'll ever talk about it?" Donovan shook his head. "No, people like her don't talk. They just keep fixing what's broken." Whitaker's gaze drifted toward the horizon where Naomi had vanished. His voice softened, almost to a whisper. Then maybe that's her way of healing. The range had long gone silent. The bleachers were empty now, the dust settling back into the grooves where boots had once pounded in laughter and panic. But the air still carried something, a weight, a hush, like the echo of a secret everyone now shared but no one dared to speak. Naomi Brooks had returned to the motor pool before noon. No escort, no fanfare, no questions answered. She parked the maintenance cart, wiped the grime from her hands, and went back to work as if the morning hadn't happened. The same fluorescent bulbs flickered above her. The same oil stains waited on the floor, but the silence felt different now, too aware. Every few minutes someone passed through, a private pretending to fetch tools, an NCO checking inventory that didn't exist, a mechanic dropping off parts that didn't need repair. All of them stole the same glance toward her, curious, cautious, reverent. No one spoke to her directly. Not yet. They just lingered, watching her tighten bolts, change light fixtures, and move with the same steady rhythm as always, trembling hands, quiet eyes. It was easier for them to watch than to talk. Easier to believe that if they didn't break the silence, maybe she would stay among them a little longer. Naomi never looked up. She just kept working. The tremor in her right hand had grown worse since the incident, a dull fatigue creeping through her fingers. The neurostabilization brace hummed faintly, low battery warning. She ignored it. She didn't want steadiness right now. She wanted the noise in her head to quiet down. Because even as she worked, the echoes of that single gunshot still pulsed behind her ribs, not pride, not satisfaction, but memory. The sharp recoil, the momentary stillness afterward, the sight of a body falling through her scope. That part never stopped replaying. The base command had already cleaned up the official story. Sniper threat neutralized by base security personnel. No names, no details, no acknowledgement. But the soldiers who'd been there knew better. They'd seen her. And word was spreading. By nightfall, whispers reached the barracks. She didn't even flinch under fire. Colonels saluted her, I swear to God. They say she's a Viper, one of the ghost unit. Some laughed it off. Others didn't, because even rumor has a heartbeat and this one felt too real, too close. Private Elena Rodriguez, the same young woman who had tried to defend Naomi on the range, couldn't sleep that night. She replayed the image of Naomi's trembling hands holding that massive rifle steady. The memory gave her chills, but not fear, something closer to awe. Around midnight, she slipped out of the barracks and walked toward the hangars. The motor pool lights glowed faintly in the dark, sodium yellow, soft against the cold. Through the open bay door, she saw Naomi sitting alone at the workbench, shoulders hunched, head bowed over a disassembled engine. Her fingers moved carefully, each motion deliberate, as if rebuilding something older than the metal in front of her. Elena hesitated in the doorway. Ma'am. Naomi didn't look up. You shouldn't call me that, she said quietly. Sorry, Elena murmured. I just wanted to thank you for what you did. Naomi set the wrench down and finally met her gaze. Her eyes were tired, shadowed by something deeper than sleeplessness. Don't thank me. You did more than anyone else did that morning. I didn't do anything, Elena said. I just told them to let you try. Naomi's lips twitched, not a smile but close. That's more than most people ever do. For a moment, the hangar was silent except for the faint hum of the lights and the distant sound of crickets outside. Elena stepped closer, her voice low. Was it true what the colonel said, the tattoo? Naomi's gaze drifted down to her wrist. The serpent ink glimmered faintly where her sleeve had ridden up again. It was a long time ago, she said softly. Different world, different rules. Elena hesitated, but the Vipers were you. Naomi's tone shifted, not angry but final. Don't chase ghosts, Rodriguez. They don't leave trails you want to follow. The young private nodded, though her curiosity burned brighter than ever. She opened her mouth to ask one more question, but Naomi had already gone back to the engine, eyes locked on the machine like it was the only thing tethering her to the present. Elena understood then. Some stories weren't meant to be told aloud. When she left the hangar, Naomi sat in silence for a long time, staring at the serpent etched into her skin. The ink had faded, but the meaning hadn't. 7 loops, 7 lives, only one still breathing. The past wasn't gone, it was waiting. The next morning, Fort Hood looked normal again. Reveille sounded, trucks rolled out. Recruits jogged the perimeter in the cold dawn air. The base moved on, or tried to. But the soldiers who'd been there couldn't forget. Sergeant Cole and his squad were called into the colonel's office before noon. The meeting was brief. No reprimands. No paperwork. Just silence and the weight of their own reflection. When they left, their faces were drawn pale. Something inside them had changed. Cole didn't go to the gym that day, didn't crack jokes, didn't post on his feed. He went to the chapel instead, sat in the back pew and stared at the floor for an hour. No prayers came, just the sound of his own guilt echoing against the stained glass. That evening, as he walked across the base, he saw Naomi by the maintenance truck again, same uniform, same calm. He froze, unsure if he should say anything. She noticed him, stopped what she was doing. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. He swallowed hard. "I owe you an apology." Naomi looked at him, expression unreadable. "For what?" "For," he faltered, "for being an idiot, for treating you like a joke." Her gaze softened just a little. "Don't apologize to me," she said. "Apologize to every soldier you'll meet after this who looks weaker than you expect." He nodded, throat tight. "Yes, ma'am." She tilted her head slightly. "Don't call me that either." He almost smiled, almost. Then he turned and walked away, the weight in his chest finally shifting. By the 3rd day, the whispers had reached command-level rumor. The official report had already been sealed, but every officer on base had heard some version of it: a mysterious woman, a single impossible shot, a colonel's salute. Major Donovan was called in to brief a visiting general, but the conversation was short. "She's not in any active database," the general said, tapping at his tablet. "You're sure about that tattoo?" Donovan nodded. "I saw it with my own eyes." The general exhaled, closing the file. "Then we never had this conversation." Donovan hesitated at the door. "Sir, if she's who I think she is, maybe she deserves." "Deserves peace," the general interrupted quietly. "If she's still alive after what they did to that unit, she's earned it." Donovan said nothing more. But as he left the office, he couldn't shake the thought that peace was the one thing Naomi Brooks might never actually have. That night, Naomi dreamt of sand. Not the soft kind that slid between your fingers, the kind that stuck to your lungs and teeth, the kind that carried heat even after sunset. She was lying prone on a ridge, wind cutting sharp across her cheek. A city burned faintly in the distance. Through the scope, she watched a convoy roll through the smoke. A voice crackled softly in her ear, familiar, female, steady. "Viper 3, confirm overwatch." Naomi's voice in the memory was younger, firmer. "Viper 3 in position, eyes on, wind 8 knots east." She blinked into the scope. The tremor in her hand, even then, barely visible, perfectly synchronized with her breath. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. Then the flash, one clean shot, one less threat in the distance, one more ghost in her memory. The dream blurred, the radio went silent. Then a voice, softer now, almost human. "We're all just marks on paper, Naomi. Someday they'll erase us too." She woke with a start. The hangar was dark, the world was quiet, her hand trembled harder than before. She sat up slowly, eyes on the faint glow of the serpent tattoo under the light. The ink shimmered like scales catching the dawn. "Already erased," she whispered. Morning came again. The world moved on, but not quite the same. The young recruits whispered her name with reverence. Some called her the ghost of Fort Hood. Others swore they'd seen her shadow on the range after dark. She ignored it all. She came to work every morning, swept the same floors, fixed the same lights. But behind every motion, behind the trembling hands and calm eyes, there was something steady, something waiting. One afternoon, as she replaced a cracked light panel in the hangar ceiling, Major Donovan stopped beneath her ladder. "You know," he said softly, "the colonel asked me if you'd accept a commendation. Quiet one, off the record." Naomi didn't look down. "Tell him thank you, but no." "You sure?" Donovan asked. "You earned it." She tightened the last screw, climbed down, and met his eyes. "I'm not sure what I earned anymore, but medals don't make ghosts sleep easier." He studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "You're right," he said quietly, "but they remind the living who to thank." Naomi gave a small, tired smile. "If they remember the lesson, that's enough." And with that she turned back to her workbench, her hands trembling gently over the tools, her focus absolute. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the flagpole against the hangar wall. The sound echoed through the motor pool like a distant salute, faint, rhythmic, familiar. And for a brief moment, as sunlight cut through the dust and caught the edge of her sleeve, the serpent shimmered once more, coiled, eternal, alive. Sleep had become an unreliable ally. It came in fragments now, half dreams, half ghosts. Naomi would close her eyes and find herself somewhere else entirely. Not Fort Hood, not the motor pool, but there, in the dust and ruin of a war that refused to end even after the headlines had moved on. The dreams didn't come every night, only when things were too quiet. And Fort Hood had been too quiet since that day on the range. She'd hear the wind first, dry, relentless, then the voice. "Viper 3, this is command. Wind east 8 knots, hold position." Then the static, always the static, like the memory itself was afraid to come through clearly. The faces came next, quick flashes, too fast to hold on to, 6 of them. 7 counting her. 7 marks on the serpent. 7 loops in the ink. The Vipers had been more than a unit. They were an experiment, one built on silence, precision, and sacrifice. No insignia, no records, no names. Their existence had been rumor even to the soldiers they'd saved. She tried for years not to think of them, but memory has a cruel way of finding cracks to seep through. That night, sitting alone in her small on-base quarters, Naomi opened the drawer of her desk. Inside, wrapped in an old cloth, was a photograph, faded, edges curled, colors bled by sand and time. 7 figures, faces half-shadowed. Desert behind them. A helicopter in the distance. She touched the edge of the photo like it might crumble under her fingertips. She could still remember where it had been taken, the day before everything went wrong. "Smile, Viper 3, her team leader had said, holding up the camera. Naomi had smirked, the kind of half-smile that wasn't quite belief, wasn't quite hope. They'd all known that picture would never hang anywhere public. It wasn't for glory. It was proof they'd been real. Now, 6 of those faces were gone. She set the photo back in the drawer and closed it gently. Some things were better kept in the dark. Outside, Fort Hood carried on as if nothing had changed. The younger soldiers trained, shouted, laughed. Engines roared. The world moved forward. But the laughter always softened when Naomi walked past. Respectful silence followed her now. No one mocked her tremor, no one dared. But sometimes that silence hurt more than the laughter ever did. She didn't want reverence, she wanted normal. In the motor pool she worked alone, humming softly under her breath. Her voice was low, rough, like she'd forgotten how to use it. Major Donovan stopped by one afternoon, leaning in the doorway. "Colonel Whitaker says you turned down the commendation again." Naomi didn't look up from the engine block she was cleaning. "Told you before, I'm not interested. He crossed his arms, studying her. You know, there are soldiers on base who have started a rumor you're still active duty, that you're undercover. Naomi gave a small, humorless chuckle. Undercover maintenance, that's new. People like stories, he said softly. They need something to make sense of what they saw. She finally looked up, meeting his eyes. You can't make sense of ghosts, Major. Donovan's gaze softened. Maybe not, but you can learn from them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air smelled faintly of oil and dust, sunlight spilling through the open hangar doors. Then Naomi said, almost to herself, You ever lose a unit? Donovan hesitated. Yeah, Kandahar 2010. She nodded slowly. Then you know. He didn't press further. Some truths didn't need words. That night she couldn't stop the memories. It started with a radio call. Viper team, Operation Black Dune is a go. Confirm readiness. Naomi had been lying in the dirt, scope fixed on a compound 2 clicks out. Wind screamed across the dunes, kicking dust into her eyes. Her spotter, Sergeant Imani Ghost Akelo, crouched beside her, calm as a statue. Viper 3 ready, Naomi had said into the mic. Copy that, came Ghost's reply. Target 1 visible, 2 guards at the west gate. You take the shot, I'll move on signal. Naomi's breath had slowed, her heartbeat sinking with the wind. The tremor in her hand was worse back then, raw nerve trauma from shrapnel months earlier. But she'd trained herself to make it part of her process. Every shake had rhythm. Every beat had purpose. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. She squeezed the trigger. The guard dropped. The compound erupted into chaos. She remembered Ghost yelling something into the comms, static, shouting, then silence. Naomi had waited for the check-in that never came. And when she finally breached the compound, it was too late. Ghost was gone, so were the others. 7 became 1. The details blurred: gunfire, dust, a helicopter that never came back. All she knew was that she'd walked away, not because she wanted to, because she had to. When the mission report was written, it said operation failed. When the names were recorded, it said bodies unrecovered. And when the files were destroyed, it said nothing at all. The world forgot them. But she never did. Naomi woke from the dream with a start, sweat beading on her skin. The faint hum of the neurobrace pulsed against her wrist. She sat up, breathing hard, staring into the dark. It had been years since she'd heard Ghost's voice, but tonight it had sounded too real. She turned on the lamp, the soft yellow light falling across the metal desk. There, next to her coffee mug, sat the small vial of nerve inhibitors she rarely used. Her fingers hovered over it. 6 hours of steadiness. 6 hours without the tremor. And a pounding headache afterward that made her wish she hadn't taken them. She twisted the cap, stared inside, then closed it again. No, the tremor wasn't her enemy anymore. It was all she had left of who she used to be. The next day, Rodriguez found her sitting outside the hangar during lunch, staring toward the firing range in the distance. Permission to join you, the young private asked. Naomi nodded without looking up. They sat in silence for a while, the breeze carrying the faint clatter of tools and voices from nearby workshops. Rodriguez finally spoke. They're saying the sniper was part of a cartel operation, the one you stopped. Naomi's voice was quiet. Doesn't matter who he was, somebody trained him well. Rodriguez hesitated, then said, I think people just want to understand how you knew where he was. Naomi exhaled. You can hear distance if you've listened to it long enough. Every bullet has a heartbeat. Every gun has a rhythm. He fired like someone who thought no one could see him, but the pattern gave him away. Rodriguez nodded slowly. You make it sound like music. Naomi almost smiled. War is noise until you learn its song. For a moment there was quiet again. Then Rodriguez asked softly, Do you ever miss it? Naomi's hand tightened around the coffee cup. "No," she said finally. "I miss them, but not it." Her eyes drifted back to the horizon. The wind caught her hair, the same dry warmth she remembered from the desert. "There's nothing to miss about being erased," she added. Rodriguez looked down at her boots. "You're not erased anymore. Everyone knows now." Naomi shook her head. "They know a story, not me. I'd rather they remember the lesson, not the name." Rodriguez frowned. "And what's the lesson?" Naomi's answer came slow, quiet. "That strength doesn't shout." That evening, the colonel ordered the range closed for maintenance. No reason was given. But as the sun began to set, Naomi stood at the edge of the field again, her shadow long across the dirt. The target screens were blank now, no holes, no marks, no trace of the V she'd carved days before. She walked to the same firing line, her boots crunching against gravel, and crouched beside the bench where the cracked rifle still sat, untouched since that morning. Her fingers brushed the duct tape. The metal was cold. For a long moment she just stared at it, and for the first time in years, let herself remember not the mission, not the loss, but the silence that came afterward. Silence could heal, but it could also bury. She raised her head, looking toward the far end of the range. The wind moved through the flags, whispering like voices she used to know. 7 loops, she murmured to herself, and now only one left. Behind her, Major Donovan's voice broke the quiet. "You know, if command ever found out what you really did that day, you'd never be left alone again." She didn't turn around. "That's why they won't." He stepped closer, stopping beside her. "You really don't want credit." Naomi's gaze stayed on the horizon. "Credit doesn't bring back ghosts, Major. It just makes people start asking questions that don't have answers." Donovan nodded slowly, his voice low. "You ever think maybe the rest of us need to hear those answers?" Naomi glanced at him then, eyes steady despite the tremor still running through her hand. "Some truths aren't meant to be told, only remembered." The major studied her for a long moment, then quietly saluted. Not regulation sharp, softer, more human. She hesitated, then returned it with the same quiet grace. As he left, the wind shifted, carrying dust across the range. Naomi closed her eyes and let the sound fill her, the echo of a bullet, the whisper of a name that no longer existed, and the soft hum of life continuing, indifferent but steady. She didn't need the world to remember her. She just needed to keep moving. Fix what was broken. One light, one machine, one moment at a time. Because sometimes, the only way to honor the dead was to live quietly enough that their ghosts could finally rest. 3 days after the range was shut down, a black SUV rolled through Fort Hood's main gate. No insignia, no plates that matched the registry. It came just before dawn, when the base was still half asleep, and the sky had yet to decide whether it wanted to be night or morning. Naomi saw it from the hangar door as she sipped her first cup of coffee. The vehicle slowed near command, idled for a moment, then disappeared behind the restricted hangars where classified briefings usually happened. She knew that pattern. She'd seen it before, years ago, right before her unit vanished. By 9 a.m., the whispers had started again. 2 men in dark suits, not from Army CID, not from anyone local. They met privately with Colonel Whitaker. No one knew why. Naomi kept her head down, cleaning an oil-streaked hydraulic jack that didn't need cleaning. But her pulse betrayed her. Ghosts never stayed buried. At noon, Whitaker found her in the motor pool. He didn't come in with command posture this time. No barked orders, no clipped tone, just quiet footsteps that stopped a few feet away. "You knew they'd come," he said. Naomi didn't look up. "They always do, eventually. They say it's just routine debriefing," he went on. "But I've been in this uniform long enough to know when someone's fishing." She wiped her hands with a rag, folded it once, twice, until it was a perfect square. They want to know how I'm still alive. Whitaker studied her for a long moment. Are you? The question caught her off guard. Her eyes lifted, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at one corner. Depends on the day. He sighed. Naomi, I can keep them away for a little while, but not forever. They'll dig until they find something. They won't, she said simply, because there's nothing left to find. But even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it. The men in suits showed up that evening. They found her still in coveralls, sitting on the tailgate of her maintenance truck, eating cold rations. Miss Brooks, the taller one said, his tone polite in the way cold steel is polite. We'd like a word. Naomi set her fork down, brushed off her hands, and nodded toward the empty chair beside her workbench. You can have several. They didn't sit. One flipped open a tablet, the other watched her like a hawk. We're conducting a background clarification regarding an incident on base 3 days ago, the tall one began. Specifically, your involvement. Routine debriefing, she asked. His jaw twitched, something like that. He swiped the screen, showing a blurred satellite image, heat signatures, movement across rooftops, a red circle marking the water tower. You called the shooter's location before base sensors triangulated. How? Naomi tilted her head. I listened. The shorter agent frowned, listened. Sound carries differently in the wind, she said. You learn to tell distance by tone. He fired from 1,200 meters, crosswind northwest, 2-second rhythm. The tall agent exchanged a glance with his partner. That's precise. She shrugged. Experience. He leaned forward slightly, the kind of experience most civilians don't have. Naomi said nothing. The taller one's voice softened, almost curious now. We've been looking into your service record. It ends abruptly in 2008. No discharge papers, no medical release, just a line that says reassignment classified. After that, nothing. Care to explain? Her pulse slowed. She prepared for this conversation years ago. I worked logistics, she said evenly. Things got messy overseas. Some files got lost. The agent smiled thinly. Files don't get lost, they get buried. Naomi met his eyes. Then maybe leave them buried. The silence stretched. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Finally, the shorter man closed the tablet. If we have further questions, we'll find you. I'm not hard to find, she said. When they left, Whitaker appeared from the shadows of the hangar. You handled that well. She exhaled slowly. They'll be back. I know, he said, but next time I'll be standing beside you. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. Don't, you'll only get pulled in. He gave a faint, weary smile. Too late for that. That night rain swept through Fort Hood. The sound against the hangar roof was heavy, relentless, a rhythm she couldn't ignore. She sat at her workbench, a mug of coffee going cold beside her, and opened the old envelope she'd kept buried for years. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, creased and yellowed with time. Operation Black Dune, after-action report. 6 names. 6 statuses, KIA unrecovered. At the bottom, handwritten in red ink. Viper 3, status unknown. Unknown. That word had followed her everywhere. Not dead, not alive, just missing. She traced the letters with her thumb. Every one of them gone. Ghost, Blade, Sable, Mako, Flint, Halo. She could still hear their voices sometimes, in the rain, in the static, in the silence between breaths. They had trusted her to get them out. And she hadn't. A drop of rain from the leaky roof landed on the paper, smudging the ink. She closed the envelope gently and set it aside. Her hand trembled harder than usual tonight. The brace hummed once, then went silent, the battery dead. She flexed her fingers, felt the tremor ripple through them like a heartbeat. It wasn't just nerves. It was memory refusing to die. The next morning, Major Donovan found her sitting on a crate outside the hangar, eyes on the sunrise. "They're leaving," he said. "Your friends in suits." She didn't turn. They weren't friends. He nodded. "They asked for your transfer papers. The colonel said he couldn't find them." "He won't," Naomi murmured. "Do I want to know why?" "No," she said softly. "But you deserve to know this. If they ever come back, tell them Viper 3 died in 8. Make them believe it." He frowned. "You think they'd buy that?" "They already did once." Donovan watched her profile against the dawn light. The lines on her face weren't just age. They were survival etched into skin. "Naomi, you can't keep running from a past that's already erased." She turned to him then, eyes calm but distant. "I'm not running. I'm staying put. That's what ghosts do. They haunt one place until it feels like home." He didn't argue. Some truths didn't need logic to be real. Later that week, Rodriguez caught sight of Naomi in the chapel, sitting alone in the back pew, hands folded, head bowed. She'd never seen her there before. After the service, Rodriguez waited outside. When Naomi emerged, she asked quietly, "You pray often?" Naomi shook her head. "Not anymore." "Then why come?" Naomi looked toward the sky. "Sometimes I just need to sit somewhere that isn't afraid of silence." Rodriguez hesitated. "I think the others are starting to understand you. Even Sergeant Cole. He told the platoon yesterday he'd never judge another soldier again." Naomi's lips curved faintly. Then something good came out of it. Rodriguez smiled. "They talk about you like you're a legend." "Legends are for the dead," Naomi said. "I'm just maintenance." That evening, as the sun dipped low, Colonel Whittaker visited her quarters. He stood at the doorway, cap in hand. "I've been ordered to reassign you," he said quietly. Naomi didn't look up from the rifle she was cleaning, an old one disassembled on a towel. "Reassign." "Officially to the Aberdeen Maintenance Division, unofficially to get you off the radar." She tightened a screw, steady even without the brace. "And you think that'll work?" He sighed. "It'll buy you time." Naomi nodded once. "Time's all anyone ever buys." Whittaker hesitated, then stepped forward, setting a sealed envelope on her desk. "There's a letter inside. It's not from command." She looked at it but didn't open it. "From who?" He met her eyes. "Someone who still believes the Vipers weren't ghosts." And then he left. She didn't open the letter right away. She waited until the base went quiet, until the world around her slipped into that soft half-silence between midnight and dawn. The envelope was plain, unmarked, the handwriting precise, old-fashioned. Inside, a single sheet of paper. No name, no signature. Just a line of text written in steady ink. Viper 3, they never found Ghost's body. Northwest Ridge, Grid 92 Alpha. You deserve to know. Naomi sat very still. Her pulse slowed to a near stop. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Hope. Small, fragile, dangerous hope. She folded the letter carefully, slid it into her pocket, and looked toward the window. The first light of morning touched the horizon. Her breath came slow, steady. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. Whatever peace she'd built here had just cracked open. And somewhere deep inside, the soldier she'd buried stirred awake. She hadn't planned to leave that night. But sometimes decisions aren't made, they happen. By dusk, the letter had burned a hole in her thoughts. Northwest Ridge, Grid 92 Alpha. Coordinates she'd memorized once long ago, back when maps still meant places and not graves. At 200 hours, she packed light, civilian clothes, field jacket, old service pistol, and the envelope. No goodbye note, no trace. The base slept while she moved through its quiet heart. Security lights washed the hangars in pale blue, the wind carrying the faint hum of generators. Every echo felt like a question. Are you sure you want to wake the past? She didn't answer. By dawn, she was already miles down the highway, Fort Hood shrinking in the rearview mirror. The horizon ahead stretched endless, the sky bruised with early light. Freedom felt strange, like silence after too much noise. Texas faded into New Mexico, then into desert that felt too familiar. Every mile she drove, the ghosts grew louder. Memories rode with her, snatches of laughter inside helicopters, the metallic click of scopes, Ghost's voice calling targets with calm precision. Wind 7 east, target marked, I got you covered, Naomi. She hadn't heard her first name spoken like that in years. By the time she reached the ridge, the sun was a molten disk hanging over the endless sand. The coordinates matched. The same place. The same emptiness. She parked the truck, stepped out, and let the heat swallow her. The air shimmered. Nothing moved. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at the landscape she'd spent a lifetime trying to forget. Then she started walking. The ridge rose from the desert like an old scar. Loose rock crunched under her boots. Her breathing fell into the old pattern, controlled, quiet, measured. Halfway up, she stopped. Something was there. A fragment of rusted metal, half buried in the dirt. She crouched, brushed away sand. It was part of a rifle stock. Her chest tightened. Another few steps and she found the remains of a tarp, shredded by time. Then a patch of fabric, faded camouflage, the edges blackened. Her throat closed. She recognized the pattern. Ghost unit patch, half gone but still visible beneath the dust. Naomi sank to her knees. The desert was silent, too silent as if listening. Imani, she whispered. The name cracked her voice open. For years, she'd imagined what she'd say if she ever found her. Now all the words were gone. She stayed there for hours, brushing sand away piece by piece, building a small cairn from stones. Not for ceremony, not for closure, just to give shape to what was left. When she finally stood, the wind had shifted. It carried the faintest sound, almost like a whisper, almost like her name. She closed her eyes and let it pass through her. Rest now, she murmured. I'll take it from here. Night fell fast in the desert. The stars came out sharp and countless, brighter than she remembered. She built a small fire and sat beside it, legs crossed, hands clasped tight to keep the tremor steady. For the first time since 2008, she let herself speak to the empty air. You said once we were marks on paper, she whispered. Turns out you were right, but you forgot one thing: paper burns slow. The flames crackled softly. She could almost hear Ghost's laughter, deep, warm, alive. Naomi smiled faintly, tears tracing the dust on her cheeks. You always said I was too quiet. Guess I took that to heart. The firelight flickered against her face, and for a moment she wasn't alone. Just before dawn, she took out the envelope again. Inside, folded beneath the letter, was something she hadn't noticed before. Another slip of paper, smaller, older, creased twice. She unfolded it carefully. Coordinates again, different ones this time. And a single word written beneath: truth. Her pulse quickened. Whoever had sent the letter hadn't been guessing. They'd known something. She marked the new grid on her map: 36 miles northeast, deep into restricted territory. The kind of place that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. By mid-morning, she reached it. No signs, no fences, just an old access road leading to what looked like a derelict compound half swallowed by the dunes. The buildings were stripped, roof panels hanging, windows shattered. But beneath the decay, something remained. A faint hum of power, the whisper of systems still alive. She drew her pistol and moved in slow, every instinct awake. The main door creaked open under her hand. Inside, dust, darkness, and the stale scent of metal and memory. She stepped through narrow corridors until she found it, a concrete room lined with rusted filing cabinets. Most drawers were empty, but one in the back resisted when she pulled. Inside were fragments of reports, charred corners, classified stamps, photos half burned. And at the bottom, a metal tag, scorched but legible. AKELLO, IMANIS. Status, recovered alive, redacted. Naomi froze, her breath hitched. Alive. She read the word again and again, as if repetition could make it real. Her mind spun through possibilities. If Imani had lived, where was she? Why hadn't she reached out? A faint sound broke her thoughts, a door creaking open somewhere behind her. She turned, gun raised. A silhouette stood in the doorway. Female still, familiar. Put that down, Viper 3. Naomi's heart stopped. The voice was older, rougher, but unmistakable. Imani. The woman stepped into the light. Her face bore the years, scars, lines, wisdom, but the eyes were the same. I told you they'd erase us, Ghost said softly. Didn't think you'd come looking to prove me right. Naomi lowered the gun slowly, disbelief breaking into a tremulous laugh. You how? The report said. They let them write what they needed to, Ghost replied. Better for everyone if I stayed dead. Naomi took a step closer, tears stinging her eyes. You could have told me. Could I? Ghost smiled sadly. You were supposed to disappear too, we both were. They stood there, two shadows in a room full of ghosts, the silence between them heavy with years of unfinished sentences. Naomi finally spoke. All this time I thought I left you behind. You did what you had to, Ghost said gently. We all did, only difference is you kept the promise. Naomi frowned. What promise? Ghost reached into her jacket, pulled out a small dog tag, 7 loops etched into the back, the serpent mark. One lives to remember the rest, you don't recall. Naomi shook her head slowly. I thought that was just something you said. It was until it was. They both laughed softly, broken laughter but real. They sat together for hours, trading fragments of stories, piecing together the years the world had taken from them. Imani told her about extraction gone wrong, about black site hospitals, about being offered new identities and silence in exchange for survival. Naomi told her about Fort Hood, about the laughter, the trembling hands, the colonel's salute. When Naomi finished, Ghost smiled faintly. So, you finally got recognized, huh? Naomi shook her head. Not for what matters. Ghost studied her face. Maybe that's the point. They fell quiet again. The wind outside howled through broken windows, scattering dust like ash. Naomi broke the silence. Why send the letter now? Ghost looked at her for a long time. Because I saw the news. Your name came up unofficially. Figured if they were sniffing around again, it wouldn't be long before they tried to pull you back in. Naomi's stomach tightened. Back in. Ghost nodded. There's talk of reviving the program. New names, new faces, same silence. Naomi exhaled slowly. Then we stopped them. Ghost gave a faint smile. Same as old times. Naomi's eyes softened. Not quite, we're not those people anymore. Maybe not, Ghost said, but someone has to remember why it shouldn't happen again. Naomi nodded, voice steady now. Then we make sure they do. By the time they left the compound, the sun was low again, painting the desert gold. 2 shadows stretched long against the sand. 2 survivors walking out of the grave they'd both escaped. At the truck, Naomi paused, looking back at the ridge where she'd built the cairn. The wind had already begun to bury it. Ghost followed her gaze. You always did have a thing for goodbyes. Naomi smiled faintly. This one's different. How so? It's not the end. They drove for miles in silence, the road endless ahead of them. Somewhere along the horizon, Naomi could see the faint silhouette of Fort Hood, distant, small but waiting. She wasn't going back the same. Neither of them were. The ghosts were quieter now, not gone but resting. For the first time in years, Naomi let herself breathe fully. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. The desert wind carried the rhythm with her, steady, human, alive. They arrived back at Fort Hood 3 days later. No announcement, no escort, no welcome. Naomi drove through the gate like she'd never left, the same security guard waving her through without a glance. The world hadn't paused for her absence. That was fine. It never had before. Ghost sat beside her in the passenger seat, hat low, eyes scanning the base as if the past might be hiding behind every building. "Feels smaller than I remember," Ghost said. Naomi gave a faint smile. "It's the same size, we just carry less weight now." They parked near the hangars, engines cooling in the soft hum of morning. Soldiers moved across the yard in rhythm, drills, shouting, laughter. The same life that had once ignored her trembling hands. Now it all felt quieter somehow. Ghost looked at her. "You sure about this?" Naomi nodded. "We don't need revenge, just truth." They didn't go to the colonel first. They went to Major Donovan. He was in his office, head buried in a report, when Naomi stepped through the door. The moment he looked up, his expression froze. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Then, seeing Ghost behind her, his tone softened into disbelief. "And she can't be." Ghost smiled faintly. "Guess the paperwork lied." Naomi stepped forward, placing the recovered file on his desk, the one she'd taken from the burned compound. "You'll want to read this." Donovan opened it carefully, eyes scanning the faded lines, the redacted blocks of text. Then he looked up at them both. This proves everything. The unit existed. You existed." Naomi nodded. "And now you know why they erased us." Donovan leaned back, exhaling hard. "You realize if this gets out, it'll cause a storm. Command, intelligence, defense contracts. Hell, the whole program will be exposed." "That's not what we want," Naomi said. "No headlines, no noise." Ghost added softly, "We just want it to end." Donovan studied them both, then nodded slowly. "All right, give me time to move carefully. I'll make sure this reaches the right desk, not the loud one." Naomi smiled faintly. "You always were one of the few who listened before speaking." He smiled back. "Learned that from a mechanic with trembling hands." For 2 days, nothing happened. They worked quietly in the hangar again, Naomi fixing engines, Ghost helping where she could, blending in like a shadow rediscovering light. Rodriguez noticed first. She froze mid-step when she saw the second woman, older, scarred, but with the same calm fire Naomi carried. "Who's she?" Rodriguez whispered. Naomi looked up from the tool rack. "A friend," she said simply. That was all the explanation anyone got, and somehow it was enough. By the end of the day, the base felt different, not louder, not busier, just grounded, as if something heavy had finally shifted. The soldiers who'd once mocked her now worked beside her in silence and respect. They didn't ask about the past. They didn't need to. Because sometimes, the way a person stands tells the whole story. That evening, Colonel Whitaker called Naomi to his office. Ghost waited outside, leaning against the wall like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Inside, Whitaker stood by the window, staring out at the field. He didn't turn as she entered. "You went back," he said quietly. Naomi said nothing. "I know because the suits came looking again," he continued. "This time they didn't ask questions. They demanded files, all redacted." He finally turned, eyes heavy with a mix of worry and admiration. "Whatever you found out there, it stirred something up." Naomi nodded. "Good." "Careful," Whitaker warned. "The people you're dealing with, they don't like unfinished stories." Naomi's gaze didn't waver. "Neither do I." He studied her for a long moment, then said, "You could still walk away. Take the transfer, disappear again." "I already did that once," she said. "Didn't fix anything." He sighed. "You're not afraid." "Every day," she said simply. "But fear's not the same as silence." Whitaker gave a small nod. Then whatever happens next, you have my respect, officially and otherwise. Naomi gave a faint smile. That's all I ever needed. That night, Naomi and Ghost sat on the roof of the hangar, watching the stars over the quiet base. The wind was cool. The world felt momentarily at peace. Ghost broke the silence first. You ever think about what comes after all this? Naomi chuckled softly. After truth. Yeah. She thought for a moment. Maybe a small garage somewhere, fixing bikes, teaching kids how to listen to engines instead of orders. Ghost smiled. You'd be good at that. And you? Naomi asked. Ghost exhaled. Maybe I'll finally learn to sleep. They laughed quietly, like old friends who'd earned the right to stop pretending they were unbreakable. Then Naomi said softly, do you ever regret it? The missions, the silence, the things we did. Ghost took a long breath. Regret, too easy. What I feel is weight, and maybe the hope that it meant something. Naomi nodded slowly. It did, if not for the world, at least for us. Ghost turned her head, studying her. You believe that? Naomi's voice softened. I have to. At dawn, Fort Hood woke to a quiet storm of messages moving up the chain of command. Donovan's report had reached the Pentagon through unofficial channels, coded, discreet, impossible to ignore. By afternoon, orders came down. Project Viper officially terminated. All research and field assets permanently decommissioned. No press release. No ceremony. Just a quiet closure of something that should have ended years ago. Naomi read the memo in Whitaker's office. When she finished, she said simply, it's done. Whitaker nodded. You understand, officially none of this ever happened. Naomi smiled faintly. That's the best ending there is. Ghost stood in the doorway, arms crossed. So what now? Whitaker looked between them. You're both free, no orders, no contracts, just live. Naomi met his gaze. We'll try. That night she stood alone by the range. Same spot, same cracked bench. The air was cool, the sun long gone. She rested her hands on the rifle she'd repaired, the one she'd once used to prove herself to men who couldn't see beyond their own pride. Now the weapon was quiet, just metal and memory. Rodriguez approached from behind, hesitant. They said you're leaving. Naomi nodded. Tomorrow. Rodriguez swallowed. You're the best soldier I've ever met. Naomi smiled gently. Then be better than me. Rodriguez frowned. How? Naomi looked toward the horizon. Listen before you act, respect before you rank, and when you see someone trembling, don't laugh, just wait. Rodriguez's eyes glistened. I'll remember that. I know you will. Naomi handed her the maintenance key card, the one she'd carried for months. Keep the lights working. The world's dark enough. Rodriguez took it with a trembling hand. Ma'am. Naomi stopped her softly. Don't. They both smiled. Later, Naomi found Ghost near the truck, loading a single duffel bag. You ready? Ghost asked. Naomi looked back at the base, the hangars, the barracks, the quiet glow of lights under the stars. For the first time, it felt less like a cage and more like a chapter closing. Yeah, she said quietly, I think so. Ghost nodded. Where to? Naomi smiled. Anywhere with open skis and no ranks. They got in the truck. The engine hummed to life, low and steady. As they drove past the gate, the guard barely glanced up. The world kept moving. The base faded into the distance. Neither woman looked back. Hours later, on an empty stretch of desert road, the truck stopped. The sky above them blazed with stars, infinite, unjudging. Naomi stepped out, breathing the night air like it was something sacred. Ghost leaned against the hood, looking up. You ever think about what they'll say about us, if anyone ever finds out? Naomi shook her head. Doesn't matter. You don't want credit. She smiled faintly. Credit is noise, I'd rather leave silence. Ghost chuckled. You always did like being the quiet one. Naomi looked at her friend, alive, scarred, real, and said softly, silence is where truth lives. For a moment the two stood there, side by side, the desert wind carrying the faint sound of something like peace. Then Ghost spoke, almost to herself. You think the others would be proud? Naomi nodded. They already are. The horizon shimmered, pale gold from the rising sun. Naomi breathed deep. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. Her trembling hand finally steadied. And as the first light touched the desert, she whispered the words that would outlive her name. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.